Not for the first time, very likely not for the last. But it feels like a moment in which we are going to have to choose, take sides, when there really isn't a middle ground to be found. And we will either have to decide to allow the basest parts of human nature to rule, or we will have to take greater and greater risks to protect what is right, what is good, what is moral and sound and ethical, and ultimately, really, what is in the best interest of all of us. Parker Palmer, who we've talked about before, from the Center of Courage and Renewal, has this notion of turning to wonder. Its use in your personal life is a way of gaining deeper understanding about yourself and about the people you're interacting with. Basically, the idea is, if something makes you mad, or if you feel defensive, or if you see someone else feeling or thinking something that seems a little bit disproportionate or odd to you, rather than reacting with judgment, you turn to wonder. So the teaching tells us to ask ourselves, quote, I wonder why they think this way, or I wonder what my reaction teaches me about myself. You set aside judgment to listen to others and to yourself more deeply. You turn to wonder. Ask the questions. Especially in places where we feel like we just don't get what's going on, or when we feel like someone else is just not getting us. The idea is to not entrench yourself ever more deeply in your own anger or opposition, but to step out of it, step out from that interaction and wonder what is actually happening here. Why are we acting this way? What lies beneath this? I've thought about this method a lot lately. I've thought about it with regard to almost everything that's going on in the world. And that I know when I read, I get angry, I start to feel ashamed for humanity, and so I've started to use this method. I've thought about it, for example, with regard to those children in Texas who set another child on fire. I can barely say those words as a sentence without wanting to cry. I forced myself to turn to wonder and say, what must those children who committed this horrible act have been taught or have been through? And I turned to wonder about the parents and the teachers and other friends, and were there signs, and if they were missed, why were they missed? Why were they not acted on? And I've tried to take this method and apply it to the current state of politics. And honestly, for me, doing all this applying of this method, I have found its limitation. It is a great method for when someone is acting out anger and what they really feel is sorrow. And you can get down there to that if you use this method. Or when someone is acting out defensiveness and what they're really feeling is shame, this is a great way to get under there, asking those questions. But there's a limit to how much I can wonder when it comes to these bigger things. Because at some point, I have no good answer for why blue wavelengths are shorter than the other ones. Someone might have a good answer, but I don't. And at some point, I actually don't care if the reason that our political scene looks the way it does is because of entrenched this or that, or shame here or there, or the economy doing this or that, or fear. At some point, the questions stop being enough. The wondering is no longer enough. At some point, because we are indeed adults, we see that the questions won't take us any further. They have to stop, and we have to face whatever it is we've uncovered, and we have to do something about it. And while it is important, as our first principle reminds us, to cultivate compassion and empathy for the racist, misogynistic, xenophobic person down the block, we are not obligated to make excuses for them, or to accept their behavior, or to elect them to official office. Well, we can totally say, yes, being a police officer is hard and difficult work. It is not then contradictory to say, and they should be held to the highest of moral, ethical, and justice-seeking standards. Someone asked me the other day what our congregation is about. I'm sure you get that question a lot too. What our purpose is. What is it that we do here that isn't done better out there? What do we offer that can't be found? Why do we bother, right? Because the reality is, we do some amazing justice-seeking work and aid work here, but we're a small group, and there are larger, more efficient justice and aid organizations out in the world. We're able to stimulate critical thinking about other religions and ethics and politics, but the reality is you could go take some continuing ed classes somewhere and do that same thing. What we do, what I believe we can do better than a nonprofit justice-seeking organization, better than a university, is that we can provide a safe place for an awakened journey. Here, we come together to be awake in gratitude and curiosity and awareness and awe. Here, we wonder about ourselves, about the world. Here, we journey side by side, trying to get closer to truth and meaning. And here we learn that being awake and wondering isn't always enough. Here we learn, hopefully, how to take a stand. We learn how to go past the wondering and the cultivating of empathy, and sometimes when it really matters, when it really counts, when what is on the line are actual lives, we learn how to take a stand and embrace what is called the prophetic voice. That voice that is, in fact, sometimes just plain angry. Sometimes defensive for all the best reasons. Sometimes radical in its call for change. The voice that cries out against speaking about immigrants derogatorily, that cries out against speaking about women like they are objects, that cries out against speaking about black people as if they were somehow not human, that cries out against speaking about Muslims as if they were lesser. And that voice has to cry out beyond these walls. It's not enough for me to stand up here on Sundays and cry out to you about what we believe and what we stand for, and morality and compassion and ethics. We have to speak the truth out there. We have to be willing to put ourselves, our jobs, our friendships on the line in order to speak truth to power. We have to be willing to hang a rainbow flag, hang a Black Lives Matter banner, take the time to actually call our senators and other representatives about pipeline issues, attend rallies and marches and whatever else we are capable of. And not all of us are able to do the same things and take the same risks, but we have to find where our risk place is and then we have to do it. And what we do here as a community that understands itself to be journeying together to deeper understandings of self and the world, what we do here as a community that understands itself to be seeking meaning and truth in our lives and in our world, what we do here as a community of faith is we learn to take a real stand. Even if it scares us, even if it hurts us, even if it makes us feel vulnerable, even if at times we are genuinely risking, we have to take a stand. Right now, at this moment in history, wondering isn't enough. Gratitude even isn't enough. Reverence and awe are not enough. It isn't enough to do what I called you to do last week. You should still do it, but it's not enough to be awake to awe and reverence. It isn't enough because we are on a precipice, because what is on the line are actual lives and the heart and soul of this nation, of humanity. In the Black Lives Matter movement, as you heard in the first reading, there's this phrase, stay woke. It means to stay conscious of what is going on in the world, to keep your eyes open even when it hurts, to face the truth even when it's hard, to stay awake, not to gratitude and awe and the good stuff only, but to the painful, oppressive realities of white supremacism and racism and misogyny. It isn't enough to be awake to what is good, we have to be awake also to what is bad. We have to keep looking it in the face. Because the last 8 years, and especially the last few years, have exposed the seedy underbelly, the shameful secrets of America that those of us who are privileged have tried to ignore before, sweep under the rug, toss back into the closet. This country has a shameful history of prejudice, oppression, violence, death dealing, and we can't ignore that. We can't ignore that it remains a hotbed of racism and prejudice. It isn't enough for us to believe ourselves righteous inside these walls. It isn't enough for us to educate ourselves and ask questions and wonder and work on ourselves until we can say with relative confidence that we aren't those things, though truly most of us probably are those things to some small degree. It isn't enough to stare at ourselves and each other inside of these walls and wonder. All that wondering and gratitude and reverence and awe has to lead to action. They have to bring us to that final question: what can I, filled as I am with gratitude for all that I have, filled as I am with reverence for all that is, filled as I am with awe in the face of this world's mystery, what, I wonder, can I do to make sure everyone is able to feel those things too? What can I do to make sure that women are treated fairly and equally and rape isn't normalized in so-called locker room banter? What can I do to ensure that children across this nation are raised compassionately so that they can become compassionate adults? What can I do to make this world safer for those who are seen as different? Or better still, what can I do to erase this vision of normal versus different? What can I do to make this world safer for trans men and women? What can I do to ensure that Black men and women stop dying? This autumn, as the world around us shows its varied colors and beauty, as our nation comes to a moment of choice, as the earth cools and we move slowly, inexorably toward that coldest, darkest moment, I challenge all of us to wonder, what can I do? What can I do to make sure this world is a bit better? What can we do? Here from this place of support, nurture, privilege, and love, what can we do? I know you have ideas, I have ideas too. And then I challenge us to make it our actual work, to move from the place of wondering to the place of action. Get all the answers on the table and then make a choice to stand up, to get to work for what is right. To pull on the sweater and the nice little hat and get out into the increasingly cold world and make a difference. Build a world, be a light for others to guide their ships by. Let's not hibernate in here this autumn. Let's agree to get out there together as a community of faith and commitment, acting for, reaching for justice, and rooted in deep love. So may it be. Please rise and body your spirit for our final hymn. It's 121, We'll Build a Land.
Free, where the order of gladness is all. and join me in extinguishing the chalice. The words are printed in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but shall not light for you, the warmth of the community, or the fire of commitment. These carry our hearts until we are together again.
Our benediction this morning comes from James. Be doers of the word and not merely hearers. Those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers, but who forget, but doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing. Go in peace.